Hello, and welcome back to this quiet space. A place where curiosity doesn't need to rush and where stories about our world can take their time, unfolding in gentle detail. If you find yourself here tonight, drifting between wakefulness and rest, I'd like to ask just one small thing. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider leaving a like. It helps more curious minds, just like yours, discover this journey. And if you'd like, share in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always remarkable to think of how many of us, scattered across different corners of the world, can be connected in a single moment like this. And of course, if you'd like to come along for more journeys, feel free to subscribe. Thank you. Now, let's take a breath together. Let the noise of the day soften and turn our focus towards something that has always been beneath us, though few of us ever stop to listen closely. Tonight, we are not gazing at the stars or imagining distant civilizations. Tonight, we are lowering our gaze, placing a hand on the earth itself, and asking what secrets it has kept. Because the ground beneath our feet is more than just rock and soil. It is a library, one without shelves, where every stone, every layer of sediment, every fossil, is a word in a language written by time. The earth has been speaking for billions of years, quietly recording its own story in ways that most of us overlook. The trick is knowing how to read it. Imagine, for a moment, you were standing at the base of a great cliff. From a distance, it might look like one smooth wall of stone, but when you walk closer, you see that it is built of many layers, stacked one upon another, like the pages of a book turned on its side. Each of those layers represents a moment, a season of floods, a long drought, the ashes of a volcanic eruption, or the slow accumulation of shells and bones at the bottom of an ancient sea. Together, they form a record of ages far older than human memory, older than any myth or folktale, older even than the first spark of civilization. And yet, in subtle ways, these stones also whisper about lives that once filled the world. Creatures we have never seen, plants that thrived in climates alien to us. Even possible hints of patterns, of structures and shapes that stir a quiet curiosity. Could there have been something more? Something beyond what we now know, now accept? We don't have proof, at least not in the way our modern minds demand. But we have echoes, fragments, and sometimes, even those are enough to stir wonder. Consider how a paleontologist can take the smallest fragment, a chipped tooth, a curve of jaw, the faint outline of a feather pressed into stone, and imagine not only the creature it belonged to, but the world that surrounded it. From a single shard, they rebuild entire landscapes. They ask, what did this creature eat? What hunted it? How did it move? How did it breathe? How did it live and die? From silence, a story begins to take shape. Now think of this. What if we, too, can read the stones for more than bones? What if the earth has kept subtle records, not just of animals and plants, but of ways of life, of fleeting civilizations, of intelligences different from our own, that flourished long before we appeared? Not human civilizations. No, not in the way we think of roads and temples and written languages, but lives that organized themselves, that adapted, that spread across the landscapes we now walk. Perhaps they built with materials long gone, woven from forests that no longer exist. Perhaps they carved into the earth with patterns that erosion has blurred into randomness. Or perhaps their traces were never meant to endure, the way our skyscrapers of glass and steel are destined, one day, to crumble back into dust. When we walk across the land, we rarely think about the countless feet, claws, and roots that touched it before us. But they were here. They moved across these same stones. They left faint impressions, footprints hardened into rock, pollen grains sealed inside amber, markings that no longer hold clear meaning, but still hum faintly with the suggestion of intention. And yet, time erases, winds grind down mountains, rivers carry away soil, oceans rise and fall, entire landscapes vanish beneath ice or are swallowed by shifting tectonic plates. The earth is always rewriting itself, always layering new stories over the old. What we see now is only a surface. Beneath it, worlds have come and gone, hidden in the depths of stone. Sometimes, though, a fragment rises to meet us. A strange object washes ashore, not obviously important, not even preserved with care, just noticed in passing, before being set aside or forgotten. A shape that doesn't quite fit with its surroundings. Too worn to identify, too subtle to prove anything. And yet, like a word overheard from another room, it suggests that something larger once existed. Something whose full shape we may never see, but whose presence we can still feel. In this way, history is not only about what we know, it is also about what we sense. The earth teases us with half-stories, with suggestions, with whispers. The bones of creatures we cannot name, the outlines of forests that grew before mammals walked the land, the faint imprints of lives that may have organized themselves in ways we have yet to imagine. And here is where gratitude enters, because as strange and mysterious as the past may be, it also frames the present in a sharper light. The air we breathe, the landscapes we inhabit, the waters that flow around us, all of these are shaped by what came before. Entire worlds had to rise and fall, unseen lives had to struggle and adapt. In order for this exact moment to exist, there is a duality here, too. For as much as we might feel awe, there can also be a quiet jealousy, a wondering about what it would have been like to see those vanished worlds with our own eyes, to walk through forests of colossal plants, or hear the calls of creatures unlike anything alive today, to glimpse the works of hands or claws, or minds that may have left their traces beneath layers of time. These are not things we can ever fully recover, but they are things we can imagine, and imagination, when fed by even the faintest pieces of truth, can carry us farther than proof ever could. So tonight, let's allow ourselves to imagine, to listen as the stones speak, not only of the familiar story of life's slow march, but of possibilities just beyond the edge of certainty. This is not fantasy. It is not folklore. It is a meditation on the language of the earth, a language that is as real as the rock beneath our feet, and as elusive as the memories carried by the wind. The earth has always spoken. The question is whether we are willing to hear. And as we begin this second journey together, let us walk slowly into that language, layer by layer, word by word. The deeper we listen, the more we realize that the earth doesn't tell its stories in a straight line. Unlike a book we can read from beginning to end, the earth speaks in fragments. A cliff here, a canyon there, a fossil bed exposed by chance when a river shifts its path. These fragments don't always arrive in order. They are scattered across continents, buried in deserts, or lying quietly beneath forests, waiting for erosion or the hand of an explorer to uncover them. In a way, this scattering is part of the mystery. It invites us to piece things together. Like a puzzle that has lost most of its pieces, what remains is never complete. But sometimes, even a single shard is enough to hint at the picture that once was. Take, for example, the discovery of ancient stromatolites. To the untrained eye, these layered stones might look like nothing more than weathered mounds, yet they are, in truth, the the fossilized remains of colonies of microorganisms, some of the earliest life on Earth. They tell us that billions of years ago, long before plants and animals, these microbial communities thrived in shallow waters, shaping not only their environment, but eventually the very air we breathe. From such subtle beginnings, the story of life expanded outward. Or think of the petrified forests found across the world. Trees turned to stone, their trunks frozen in time. They are silent now, but in their silence lies the record of climates long gone. Trees that once reached toward a different sun, in an atmosphere with different balances of oxygen and carbon, stand as stone monuments to eras we can scarcely imagine. And yet, just as we marvel at these traces, there is always the possibility of more, of things that have not yet been uncovered, or that may never be. For every fossil we find, countless others have been ground into dust by glaciers, crushed by shifting tectonic plates, or carried out to sea. Time is both a preserver and an eraser, keeping some stories while letting others slip into silence. This is where imagination begins to stir again. If the Earth has kept such extraordinary records of simple creatures, plants, and long-vanished environments, what else might have once existed here? What kinds of beings might have walked these lands in ways we haven't yet understood? Some researchers point to the Silurian hypothesis, the idea that if an intelligent civilization had existed millions of years before humans, would we even be able to detect it? After all, most of our structures, our roads, our cities, are built of materials that do not endure on geologic timescales. In a few million years, steel corrodes, glass shatters, concrete crumbles into dust. Even our greatest monuments, if left untended, will one day be swallowed by forests, seas, or deserts. If another intelligence once lived here, their traces may have vanished into the same silence that swallowed countless other forms of life. And yet, perhaps faint echoes remain, patterns in the rock that seem almost deliberate. Objects that wash ashore, weathered beyond recognition, but carrying a suggestion of shape. Remnants that, like the smallest fossilized bone, could inspire entire reconstructions in the mind. Think of how archaeologists today can stand among ruins and feel the weight of history, walking through a crumbled wall, seeing the outlines of streets, imagining the lives that filled them. But what if the ruins are not of stone buildings, but of landscapes themselves? Carved valleys, altered rivers, arrangements of plants and stones that once meant something, now obscured by erosion. These might not look like ruins to us at all. They might pass as natural, but natural to whom? To us, now, looking backward with our present understanding. To those who came before, they might have been as familiar and intentional as our cities are today. And here lies the duality, the way time gives and takes in equal measure. We marvel at what has been preserved, but we also feel a quiet yearning for what has been lost. There is gratitude in knowing we can even glimpse these fragments, but also a sense of longing for the worlds we can no longer touch. In modern times, we walk across concrete sidewalks, drive on asphalt roads, and live in towers of steel and glass. These are the markers of our age, but imagine, millions of years from now, what little of this will remain. A layer of ash, perhaps, traces of unusual chemical signatures in the soil, a few stubborn fragments of stone carved into unusual shapes, weathered beyond recognition. To whatever comes after us, would these seem like signs of civilization, or just anomalies in the geologic record? Now shift that thought in reverse. When we see anomalies in the ancient record, things that don't quite fit, we are faced with the same choice. Do we see them as accidents of nature, Or could they be the faded remnants of something intentional, something meaningful, something we no longer have the language to decode? The beauty of this mystery is that it doesn't require us to believe, only to wonder. Wonder keeps us awake, but it also soothes us, because it reminds us of how vast the story of Earth really is. It humbles us to realize how small our own moment is in comparison, and how much came before we ever arrived. And sometimes, this wonder leads to discoveries that are not speculative at all, but grounded in real history. The ruins of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, for example, push back the timeline of human civilization far earlier than once believed. Before agriculture, before written language, people gathered to build vast stone monuments. Their purpose remains debated, but the discovery reminds us how fragile our assumptions are. If such a complex site could remain buried for thousands of years, waiting to be found, what else might still lie hidden, waiting beneath the soil? Or consider the Antikythera mechanism, a device pulled from a shipwreck off the coast of Greece. At first it seemed like nothing more than a corroded mass of bronze, but studies revealed it to be an astonishingly advanced ancient computer, capable of tracking celestial movements with precision. It was unlike anything else known from its time, an object that didn't quite belong, and yet undeniably real. Proof that what we think we know about the past can shift with a single discovery. These examples remind us that history is not fixed, it is fluid. Every new finding changes the way we understand what came before. And if this is true for recent history, for the last 10,000 years, imagine how much more flexible the story might become when we look back tens of millions, or even hundreds of millions of years. This is not about fantasy. It is about humility. The humility to accept that we may not yet have the full story. The humility to imagine possibilities beyond what we currently know. The humility to admit that time, in its vast patience, keeps many of its secrets hidden. And so, as we stand in the present, we are left with a choice. We can look at the earth as nothing more than rock and soil, a background for our lives. Or we can look deeper, listening to the subtle echoes, piecing together the scattered fragments, and allowing ourselves to wonder what more might have been. The stones do not speak in human voices, but if we listen, we might just hear them all the same. The land beneath our feet has not always looked this way. When we gaze at mountains, rivers, and coastlines, it's easy to think of them as eternal. The mountain feels immovable, the sea feels timeless. The desert seems as though it has always stretched to the horizon. But time tells a different story. None of these landscapes are fixed. They are temporary, as fleeting in their forms as clouds passing overhead. Take, for example, the Appalachian Mountains in North America. Today they are worn, gentle, rolling. Their peaks are covered in forests, their valleys filled with streams. But once, these mountains were higher than the Himalayas, towering jagged and sharp against the sky. Time wore them down, rain carving valleys, glaciers smoothing their edges. Now they seem calm, even familiar, but hidden in their stone is the memory of their violent youth, a reminder that what seems ordinary today was once extraordinary. This is one of the great lessons of geology. The landscapes we know are only chapters in a book that never ends. The Sahara Desert, for instance, was not always dry. In fact, not so long ago, it was green, lakes spread across its surface, animals roamed, people painted on the walls of caves, leaving behind images of giraffes, hippos, even fish. The desert that now feels eternal was once a cradle of life, and one day, it may become green again. In these transformations, we glimpse the duality of time. On one hand, we feel awe at the Earth's ability to change, to erase one landscape and create another. On the other hand, there is a sense of melancholy. The green Sahara is gone, and we can only imagine what it must have felt like to walk its shores, to hear frogs in the reeds, to watch storms gather over lakes that no longer exist. What was once common is now unthinkable, but this melancholy can also stir gratitude. If deserts can become forests and mountains can collapse into valleys, then the world we know today, our own rivers, our own fields, our own forests, are precious precisely because they are temporary. They will not last forever. One day, they too will change. To walk among them now is to walk among fleeting miracles. The same is true for life itself. The creatures that inhabit the earth today are the result of endless cycles of change, adaptation, and extinction. The mammoths that once roamed the frozen plains are gone. The giant dragonflies of the Carboniferous period, with wingspans as wide as hawks, no longer darken the skies. And yet, traces of them remain in the fossils we unearth, in the layers of stone where their shadows are preserved. Sometimes, the contrast between past and present is almost surreal. Imagine standing in the same spot, but across to different ages. In one, a swamp filled with towering ferns and insects buzzes around you. In another, the swamp is gone, replaced by sandstone cliffs and desert wind. And in another, it may be a city of glass and steel, with cars rushing by. The ground beneath each version is the same earth, but the stories it tells are completely different. This shifting backdrop invites us to wonder about the civilizations, human or otherwise, that have lived through these changes. Imagine a community that built its homes in the green Sahara, adapting to its lakes and rivers, thriving in the abundance. What did they think when the rain stopped, when the lake shrank, when the desert slowly took over? Did they leave? Did they adapt? Or were their lives slowly erased, leaving behind only paintings on cave walls as whispers of their presence? Now, layer onto this the possibility of civilizations further back, far beyond memory, perhaps even before humans. If the Earth has transformed so dramatically in just the span of human history, how much more might have been lost across millions of years? Could an ancient intelligence have made their lives among landscapes now erased, their monuments swallowed by shifting sands, their traces dissolved in rising seas? Sometimes, we catch hints that stir this line of thought. Objects washed ashore that seem strange, stones arranged in patterns that might be natural, or might be something more. Fossils that suggest a shape just unusual enough to spark imagination. Like the archaeologist who reconstructs an entire creature from a single bone, we find ourselves imagining what a fragment might once have belonged to. It is here that the contrasts become most powerful, because in imagining what might have been, we also sharpen our awareness of what we have now. We are reminded that our own cities, our own homes, our own ways of life are no more permanent than those that came before. We may walk among skyscrapers, but to time, they are as fragile as sandcastles at the edge of the tide. This realization could be frightening, but it can also be grounding. It can draw us into gratitude, to know that this moment, this world of rivers, mountains, forests, deserts, and seas exists now, for us, is a gift. We are witnesses to a chapter in the Earth's story, and while the chapter will not last forever, it belongs to us while we live it. And still, we wonder about those who came before, not in fear, but in curiosity. Were their lives filled with the same struggles against environment that we face now, though in different forms? Did they feel both awe and humility before the landscapes of their time, just as we do? Did they build, create, dream, and leave behind remnants so faint that they now appear only as mysteries in the stone? Perhaps, perhaps not. The earth does not answer these questions directly. Instead, it invites us to listen, to walk through deserts and forests, to touch the stones of mountains, to imagine the countless forms of life and culture that have risen and fallen here. Each landscape is a palimpsest, written over again and again, yet never completely erased. In the end, this interplay of time is what makes the earth such a profound teacher. It shows us impermanence, but also resilience. It reveals loss, but also renewal. It humbles us with its age, but also comforts us with the reminder that we are part of its story, no matter how fleeting our chapter may be. So when we look at the world today, at the green forests, the wide oceans, the deserts that stretch beyond sight, we might carry with us both gratitude and wonder. Gratitude for what is, and wonder for what has been, and in that balance, we find a deeper connection not only to the Earth's history, but to our own place within it. The stones beneath us hold their silence. But if we close our eyes and let our imagination walk backward through time, we might just glimpse the shadows of worlds that once were, and worlds that may yet come again. The Earth is a canvas of memory. It keeps no written records, but it holds its past in stone, in fossils, in the quiet outlines of patterns worn into the land. The story is incomplete, fragmented, and often obscured. But sometimes, if we look closely, we sense the faint echoes of something more. When archaeologists uncover a shard of pottery, they rarely see it as only a broken object. Instead, they see possibility. That shard could belong to a bowl that once held water or grain. It might have been part of a ritual, or simply a tool of daily life. The fragment invites imagination. It suggests that behind this single piece was once a whole world of customs, people, and moments, now reduced to silence. What if the earth itself is scattered with such fragments, not just from the civilizations we know, but from ones older, erased by time? What if every strange stone, every object whose origin cannot be fully explained, is not just a curiosity, but a whisper of something once lived, once felt, once known? In speaking of lost civilizations, it is easy to let the mind wander too far, to paint pictures of towering cities made of crystal, or impossible machines far beyond our reach. But the truth, or perhaps the beauty, may lie in something simpler. Imagine, for a moment, a civilization not unlike our own in spirit, but utterly different in form. They may not have built skyscrapers or highways. Instead, perhaps they built with earth and water, weaving their homes into the landscapes they lived in. Their architecture might have been temporary, dissolving back into the ground as easily as it was raised, leaving little to no trace thousands of years later. Perhaps their culture revolved around rhythms we no longer recognize. The migration of rivers, the cycles of plants, the songs of wind through canyons. Where we build clocks and calendars, they may have built rituals around the earth's quieter language. Seasons not as numbers, but as ceremonies. Time not as hours, but as echoes of nature's own patterns. Their tools may have been unlike anything we would expect. Imagine a civilization that did not carve or cut stone, but learned instead to shape living wood, guiding trees to grow into forms they needed. A hall of branches woven into shelter, bridges grown from the intertwining of roots. Such creations would not leave behind monuments of stone, but the forest itself would have been their architecture. Over centuries, as trees died and forests shifted, nothing would remain but soil and echoes. These practices would be invisible to us now. Yet, here and there, we sometimes stumble on places that feel as if they hold more than meets the eye. A grove of trees arranged in a circle that seems too precise to be random. A series of stones weathered into shapes that suggest hands once guided them. A pattern of erosion on a cliff face that looks uncannily deliberate. We dismiss them, often rightly, as the work of chance, and yet the thought lingers. What if chance is sometimes just the residue of forgotten intention? Such a civilization would have lived in deep contrast to our own. Where we build permanence, they embraced impermanence. Where we carve the earth to suit our needs, they may have bent themselves to the rhythms of the earth. It is not that their way was superior, nor ours inferior. It is simply another way of being, one erased by time, leaving behind only fragments so faint we struggle to recognize them at all. This subtle imagination draws us into a peculiar kind of gratitude, because in pondering their existence, we also reflect on our own. We see how our lives, our buildings, our practices are also temporary, destined one day to dissolve into dust. And rather than frightening us, this realization can ground us. It teaches us to cherish what we have, our homes, our landscapes, our time, knowing that they, too, are fleeting. But the earth does not only hold mystery in what is hidden, it also reveals it in what has been uncovered. Fossils of plants and animals tell us of ecosystems vastly different from today's. Ancient forests preserved in stone remind us of times when the air was thicker, when dragonflies with wingspans like hawks darted through the sky. Coral reefs buried beneath deserts whisper of oceans where now there is only sand. These discoveries are not the product of imagination. They are tangible, real, scientific, and yet, when viewed with a sense of wonder, they are every bit as mysterious as the fragments of cultures we can only guess at, because they remind us that the earth is always erasing and rewriting itself, that what seems impossible today may have been ordinary once, and maybe again. And here, in this space between what is known and what is imagined, gratitude deepens. To walk on the earth today is to walk not only among the living, but among the ghosts of worlds before us. Every step is on ground that has held other lives, other stories, and every horizon we look at, whether desert, forest, mountain, or ocean, is only a momentary shape in the earth's endless transformations. In this light, our own place in the story feels both smaller and more meaningful. Smaller, because we see how brief our presence is compared to the vast sweep of time. More meaningful, because to exist in this fleeting chapter is to share in something so ancient, so vast, that it humbles the imagination. This is perhaps why whispers of lost civilizations to something so deeply human in us. They remind us that we are not separate from time's great cycle. We are not the first to wonder, to build, to imagine, and we will not be the last to be forgotten. Yet within that truth lies a kind of peace. If the earth has carried countless lives before us, and will carry countless more after us, then we are part of an unbroken chain. Our story is not isolated. It is woven into the very fabric of the planet, carried forward like all the others, even if only as fragments left behind for future eyes to wonder over. And so, when we imagine a lost civilization, whether human or something else entirely, we are not indulging in fantasy. We are honoring the possibility that the earth holds more stories than we will ever know. We are practicing humility before the silence of time. And in that humility, we may discover not fear, but a deeper connection to the world we inhabit and to the fleeting gift of life itself. The stones may never tell us directly. The winds may never speak in clear words, but still, we listen. And in listening, we feel the presence of something larger than ourselves, something timeless, moving quietly beneath the surface of all we see. The story of life on Earth has never been one of ease. Every age has brought with it a new balance of struggle and survival, of abundance and scarcity. For those who came before us, whether known or unknown, the environment was both a provider and a challenger. To live was to constantly negotiate with the forces of nature, never certain when the balance might tip. Imagine a civilization that rose in a time when rivers shifted unpredictably, when floods came with little warning. Their homes might have been built not for permanence, but for flexibility. Perhaps they were designed to float, or to be moved quickly from one location to another. Their tools may have been light, their belongings few, not because they lacked the knowledge to accumulate, but because the landscape demanded that they live with agility. What stories would emerge from such a way of life? Children learning from birth to read the signs of rising water, elders teaching the subtle differences in the sound of wind that meant a flood was approaching, songs not written in books, but sung to remember the safe paths across shifting land. Now, contrast this with our own time. We build our cities to resist water, to control it, to bend it into reservoirs and canals. And yet, even with all our technology, we still face floods that remind us how little control we truly hold. In this, the mirror of time reflects not only how different we are from those before us, but how alike. The challenge remains, only the tools have changed. Perhaps in another part of the earth, a civilization lived not with too much water, but with too little. Imagine people in an arid landscape, where survival meant coaxing life from soil that yielded reluctantly. They might have dug deep cisterns to collect rain, or learned to farm in patterns that captured even the faintest dew. Their daily rituals could have revolved around the sacredness of water, each drop valued, each well a place of reverence. We see echoes of this in real history. The desert civilizations of our unknown world, the Nabateans who carved Petra into rose-red cliffs, mastered the art of water collection in one of the harshest deserts on Earth. The ancestral Pueblones of North America built complex systems to catch and direct rain into reservoirs. These are tangible reminders that the line between survival and collapse was thin, that every drop could mean the difference between flourishing and famine. But imagine, too, the possibility of a civilization erased entirely because their methods were too subtle, too fragile to endure the sweep of time. If their cisterns were made not of stone, but of clay, if their homes melted back into earth with each passing generation, then when the rain stopped for too long, perhaps their memory did as well. Nothing remained but empty land, the traces of their ingenuity washed away. This duality of abundance and struggle is not just ancient, it is with us still. Today, even with global trade and technology, regions suffer from drought and flood, famine and storm. Our challenge is no different from theirs. How to live in balance with forces larger than ourselves. Perhaps their stories, whispered in fragments of forgotten lore, are not warnings of doom, but lessons in humility. And beyond water, there is ice. There were ages when great sheets of it pressed across the earth, carving valleys, grinding stone into soil. Civilizations that may have lived during these colder times would have faced landscapes we can scarcely imagine. What if their homes were not built above ground, but beneath it, carved into frozen earth where warmth could be preserved? What if their fires were not only sources of heat, but symbols of survival, rituals passed from generation to generation, flames carefully guarded like living ancestors? The struggle against cold would shape more than shelter. It would shape the very rhythm of life. Long winters demanding patience, stillness, resourcefulness. Short summers celebrated with gatherings, feasts, and migrations. A cycle that demanded reverence for time itself, for the fleeting warmth that carried them from one frozen age to another. Again, we see reflections in our own age. Though most of us do not live in constant ice, the memory of cold lingers in traditions handed down. The bonfires of midsummer festivals, the celebrations of winter solstice, the way we mark the longest nights and shortest days, all are echoes of a time when survival meant tracking light and dark with devotion. The duality is clear: warmth and cold, scarcity and plenty, danger and safety. Civilizations, whether remembered or forgotten, lived not in opposition to these forces, but in negotiation with them. They adapted, endured, and sometimes vanished. And their vanishing does not diminish their story. It deepens it, reminding us how fragile life is against the vast canvas of time. There are other struggles too, less visible but equally powerful. The slow rise of mountains, the shifting of coastlines, the eruption of volcanoes that painted skies with ash. Each of these forces reshaped not only landscapes, but the lives of those who dwelled within them. Imagine a culture that lived in the shadow of a restless volcano. Perhaps they did not fear it as we might, but revered it, weaving it into their myths and ceremonies. The eruption would have been both destruction and renewal, fields buried, but soil enriched. Death and life entwined, inseparable. We find hints of this reverence in cultures around the world. The Polynesians tell stories of Pele, goddess of fire and volcanoes, both creator and destroyer. The ancient Minoans may have been deeply marked by the eruption of Thera, an event so powerful altered not only their island, but their culture itself. And yet, how many other such stories were lost entirely? Civilizations erased not only by ash, but by time, their memory buried beneath layers of earth. Perhaps all that remains are strange black stones, once molten, now silent, waiting for someone to pick them up and wonder. This is the balance of the earth. It gives and it takes, it nurtures and it challenges. Civilizations rise in its embrace and fall in its silence. And through it all, the duality of struggle and abundance threads itself into every life. We feel it even now. In the comfort of a warm home during winter, we sense the contrast of those who once faced cold without such shelter. In the ease of clean water flowing from a tap, we glimpse the weight of those who once walked miles to gather a single jug. In the luxury of food from across the world, we hear the faint echo of those who prayed for a single harvest to succeed. And here is where gratitude blooms. For when we look at our present through the lens of their past, we are reminded that what feels ordinary to us is extraordinary in the arc of history. We are not separate from the struggles of those who came before. We are their continuation, shaped by the same earth, living within the same fragile balance. It is easy to take for granted the comfort of our time, just as it is easy to despair over its struggles. But in remembering the duality faced by lost civilizations, we are offered perspective. Their lives were not easier or harder than ours, only different, sculpted by the landscapes and forces of their time. And in their resilience, in their ability to endure, they offer us a quiet inheritance, the knowledge that survival, in any age, is not guaranteed, but earned through adaptation, humility, and care. And perhaps, when our own time has passed into memory, when our cities have crumbled and our names have been forgotten, we too will leave behind fragments. Pieces of glass worn smooth into beaches, patterns in soil where buildings once stood, echoes in stone that future eyes may find and wonder over. They will not know our full story, they will only know fragments. And in those fragments, they may imagine a civilization that struggled, that adapted, that lived in duality, just as we imagine now of those who came before. In this way, we are all connected, not by permanence, but by impermanence, not by certainty, but by the shared thread of living within a world that is always changing, always demanding, always offering both challenge and beauty in equal measure. Across the long arc of time, so much has been erased. Winds grind stone into sand, waters carve valleys and scatter bones, fire reduces entire forests to ash. Yet sometimes, just enough is spared, just enough to remind us that something existed, something lived, something left its trace. It is rarely the whole story that endures. More often, it is a fragment, a shard, a fossil, a curious object washed ashore, something that by itself may look unremarkable, but to eyes willing to wonder, it is a whisper of a greater whole. Picture, for instance, a stretch of beach after a storm, driftwood scattered along the sand, shells broken and scattered, stones polished smooth. Among them, a single piece of something different, not wood, not shell, not stone. Something harder to place. It may be bone, or it may not. It may be at all, or it may be nothing at all. For the casual passerby, it is simply discarded, irrelevant. But for another, it is enough to spark imagination. This is how so much of our understanding of the past is pieced together, from fragments, from hints. Paleontologists have built entire images of creatures from a single tooth, a single claw. Archaeologists reconstruct forgotten lives from a shard of pottery, a fragment of wall, a groove carved into stone. From the smallest remnant, entire worlds are imagined. But what of those remnants that do not fit? What of the washed-up piece that seems to belong to nothing we know? These are the objects that blur the line between certainty and mystery, between history and legend. They may not prove anything on their own, but they carry the tantalizing suggestion of stories we cannot yet fully tell. Consider the stones scattered across the English countryside, standing in circles, stacked in formations that seem both intentional and impossible. To us, they are monuments of mystery, weathered by thousands of years. We debate whether they were temples, calendars, or markers of the sky, but for those who first stood them upright, they were neither relics nor mysteries, they were simply part of life. Or imagine the vast geoglyphs of Nazca, etched into the desert of Peru. From the ground, they are lines, scratches in the earth. But from above, they become shapes, hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, stretching across the barren land. To us, they seem extraordinary. To those who carve them, they may have been ritual, or story, or something else entirely. What we see as remnants may only be shadows of meaning. And then there are the oddities. Objects found out of place, far from where they should be. A fossilized seashell embedded high in a mountain. A tool buried beneath layers of rock far older than human history as we understand it. Sometimes these findings are explained by science, by the long movements of Earth that lift oceans into peaks, that bury the recent beneath the ancient, but sometimes explanations are less clear. It is here, in the hazy space between the explained and the unexplained, that imagination takes root. Perhaps these are not anomalies to be dismissed, but fragments of forgotten stories, pieces of civilizations erased not by their insignificance, but by the relentlessness of time. Picture a society that lived along a great river thousands upon thousands of years ago. Their tools were crafted not from stone or bronze, but from materials that have long since vanished: wood, plant fibers, bone softened by the soil. When the floods came, their belongings scattered, most dissolved, washed away, forgotten. But perhaps one small fragment endured, carried downstream, buried deep, uncovered centuries later as something strange, out of place, and dismissed. The fragment is not the proof of their existence, but it is the echo, and echoes, though faint, still carry sound. We see this in the way erosion sculpts the earth. A canyon may look eternal, but it is the result of constant wearing down, each raindrop carrying away a fraction of stone. Fossils may appear solid, but they are only shadows in mineral form, the bones themselves long dissolved. What we inherit from the past is never whole, only impressions, silhouettes, remnants. This is not a failure of history, it is the nature of time. Just as our own belongings, centuries from now, may be reduced to scattered fragments, so too were theirs. Our plastic, our steel, our glass may endure longer than their clay and wood. But even so, the erosion of millennia will not preserve the whole story. It will leave behind pieces, scattered and strange, waiting to be puzzled over by eyes not yet born. And yet, is there not a strange beauty in this? That what survives is not the entirety, but the fragment, that the remnant allows us to imagine, to wonder, to piece together stories larger than the evidence itself. Perhaps this is part of the balance of existence, that certainty is never given freely, only hinted at, inviting us to seek meaning in what remains. We might ask ourselves, what does it mean that fragments endure? Why is it that a single bone, a single shard, a single washed-up piece can carry so much weight? Perhaps it is because we recognize in those fragments a mirror of our own lives. We, too, are fragments of a greater whole, of families, of communities, of generations stretching back further than memory. Just as a shard of pottery hints at a whole vessel, we hint at lives lived before us, and lives yet to come. In this sense, the remnants of forgotten civilizations are not only their stories, they are ours. They remind us that we are part of a chain, that our own time will one day be reduced to fragments. And perhaps, just perhaps, the beauty lies not in being fully remembered, but in being faintly imagined by those who come after. Think again of that washed-up object on the beach, dismissed by most, but held for a moment by curious hands. It may mean nothing, or it may be a whisper from another time, another civilization, another story nearly erased. Its significance lies not in what it proves, but in what it inspires: a moment of wonder, a question asked, a curiosity stirred. And is that not what connects us most deeply to those who came before? Not certainty, but curiosity, not answers, but questions. The fragments they left, whether intentional or accidental, are invitations. Invitations to wonder, to imagine, to recognize that the earth is older, stranger, and richer than any single story can contain. As the sea pulls at the shore, as winds carve stone, as ice reshapes valleys, the world continues its quiet work of erasure. But just as often, it leaves behind something small, something overlooked, something waiting. And when it does, we are reminded that time does not erase everything. It leaves us enough to wonder, enough to believe that we are not the first, nor the last, but part of a continuum that stretches beyond memory. In the fragment, there is mystery. In the remnant, there is story. And in the act of finding them, we are reminded of our place, temporary, fragile, but deeply connected to the endless unfolding of the earth. The earth remembers, even when we do not. When we think of memory, we imagine minds, books, recordings, things deliberately meant to preserve. But the planet itself carries a different kind of memory. It is written not in ink, but in stone, in water, in soil. The mountains, the deserts, the forests, they hold the quiet echoes of civilizations long past, not in words, but in presence. Stand before a mountain, and you are looking at something older than language, older than story, older, perhaps, than life as we know it. Its slopes may look solid, eternal, unchanging. Yet every mountain is a monument to upheaval, to collisions of continents, to fire and molten stone forced upward, to ages of erosion wearing down peaks into valleys. In their silence, mountains are storytellers. They tell us that the earth is alive, restless, and ever-changing. Now imagine the civilizations that rose and fell in the shadows of those mountains. How many lives unfolded there, beneath jagged ridges, in valleys carved by glaciers and rivers. We build our homes near mountains for water, for protection, for the resources hidden in stone. And yet, the mountains outlast us. Our walls crumble, but their slopes endure. When time erases the memory of the people, the mountains still carry the imprint of their presence. Terraced hillsides, faint trails etched into the rock, caves blackened by ancient fires. Subtle hints that say, someone was here. The deserts, too, are keepers of memory. At first glance, they seem empty, endless expanses of sand, barren, lifeless. But deserts are not empty. They are filled with whispers of what came before. Every dune is in motion, shaped by winds that never rest, covering and uncovering in endless cycles. A city that once thrived in the desert may disappear beneath the sands, forgotten for centuries, only to emerge again when the winds shift. Think of the lost city of Uba, once called the Atlantis of the Sands. For centuries, it was dismissed as legend, a tale told in ancient texts. But then, beneath the rubble Collie Desert, remnants were found, stone towers buried in sand, roads leading nowhere. The desert had hidden them, preserved them, kept them secret, until it was time for the story to return. In this way, the desert becomes both destroyer and guardian. It swallows, but it also protects. What lies beneath the sand may be unknown, but it is not lost. The earth keeps it safe, hidden from sight, until the moment arrives when it may be seen again. Forests, too, carry memory in their own way. A forest may look timeless, but it is constantly renewing, replacing itself tree by tree, season by season, and yet beneath the soil, beneath the roots, lie the traces of lives before. Stone foundations swallowed by moss, pathways reclaimed by roots, tools buried beneath layers of leaves. The forest does not erase, it enfolds. There are places where entire cities once stood that are now nothing more than green silence. The temples of Cambodia, their stones covered in strangler figs. The ruins of Central America, swallowed by jungle. These places remind us that nature is patient. It waits, it reclaims. What we believe permanent is always temporary in the face of roots and rain. And in the process, the forest creates a contrast, stone and vine, ruin and growth, the past and the present intertwined. Even the oceans are storytellers. Beneath the waves lie cities, temples, villages, places once on land, now claimed by water. Sea levels rise and fall over the course of ages, reshaping coastlines, swallowing what was once familiar. Off the coast of India, divers have found structures submerged, suggesting human presence thousands of years ago, where today only fish swim. Off Japan, the Yonaguni Formation sparked debate: natural or carved by ancient hands. Whether shaped by man or nature, they remind us that the ocean hides as much as it reveals. There is a quiet poetry in the way Earth reclaims, covers, and preserves. Civilizations may vanish, but the landscapes hold their echoes. A stone step carved into a mountainside, a line of terraces etched into a valley, a road that begins in the desert and ends beneath the sands. These are not always grand monuments. More often, they are subtle. Details so easily missed, yet profound once noticed. This is where the contrast of time becomes clear. Today, we pave highways across valleys, carve tunnels through mountains, build towers that touch the clouds. We imagine permanence, yet time tells us otherwise. The roads will crack, the towers will crumble, and the earth will fold them back into itself, just as it has always done. The landscapes we think of as backdrops are not passive, they are participants. They shape us, they outlast us, and in their silence, they remember. Consider, for a moment, what it feels like to walk among ruins. There is a stillness, a heaviness in the air. The walls may be broken, the roofs collapsed, but something remains. It is not only stone you feel, it is presence. The presence of those who once lived, who once built, who once dreamed within those walls. That presence is carried not just by the ruins, but by the land itself. The ground holds the footsteps. The wind carries the echoes, the place remembers, and perhaps this is the deeper truth. That memory is not only human, the earth itself is memory. Every rock, every grain of sand, every tree carries the story of what has been. We are simply not always fluent in the language of the land. But when we pause, when we listen, when we open ourselves to what the earth has to say, we begin to understand. The mountain speaks of endurance, the desert speaks of patience, the forest speaks of reclamation, the ocean speaks of transformation. Together, they remind us that civilizations rise and fall, but the earth continues, and in its quiet way, it keeps the memory. So when we look upon a mountain, a desert, a forest, or an ocean, we are not only seeing nature, we are seeing history. We are seeing the faint shadows of lives that once were, stories that have been forgotten, echoes that still linger in stone and soil. And perhaps, in recognizing this, we begin to see our own lives differently. For if the earth remembers, then we, too, will be remembered, not in words, perhaps, but in presence. In the traces we leave behind, in the way the land will hold our echoes, long after we are gone. There are moments when the earth speaks more loudly than usual. For centuries, a landscape may appear silent, unchanged, indifferent. A desert dune shifts quietly in the wind. A forest grows steadily, roots entangling stones below. An ocean rolls its waves across the same coastline day after day. But then, suddenly, something shifts. A storm cuts through the land. A flood uncovers what was hidden. An earthquake breaks the ground open. And what was silent memory becomes visible once again. It is in these moments that the earth reveals its secrets. Sometimes the revelation is grand, the unearthing of temples, statues, or entire cities. Other times, it is subtle, a single shard of pottery, a tool, a fragment of bone. Yet even in these small discoveries, the imagination awakens. A single object can expand into a story, a life, a civilization. Consider Pompeii. For nearly 2,000 years, The city lay buried beneath ash and stone, silent, forgotten. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius had sealed it away in an instant. 4 generations, people lived above the buried city without knowing. Then, piece by piece, it was uncovered. Streets, homes, frescoes, and even the forms of people, frozen in their final moments. The earth, which had once hidden, now revealed, not as myth, but as proof. There is something humbling about the way revelation occurs. It is not on our schedule. It is not when we demand it. The earth reveals when it chooses, through the flow of time and chance. And when it does, the stories we tell ourselves change. What was legend becomes history. What was forgotten becomes known. The desert has often been the stage for such revelations. Winds uncover ruins long buried, shifting sand like the turning of pages in a book. In the Sahara, explorers have stumbled upon petroglyphs, carvings of giraffes, hippos, fish, evidence that the desert was once fertile, filled with lakes and rivers. Each carving, each symbol, is a message from another time. The land itself testifying to what it once held. Even forests reveal their secrets, though in a slower, more deliberate way. A farmer clears land for crops and discovers stone walls beneath the soil. A tree falls, its roots pulling up fragments of pottery or brick. The forest, which had once reclaimed, occasionally returns what it has taken. As if to remind us that the past is never entirely lost, it is simply waiting beneath the surface. And the oceans, perhaps the greatest keeper of secrets, occasionally offer glimpses. After storms, fragments of wood, pottery, or stone may wash ashore, carried by currents from far-off places. A diver exploring a reef may stumble upon the outline of a structure, its stones now covered in coral. Off the coast of Egypt, entire sections of ancient Alexandria lie beneath the waves, rediscovered by chance. Statues of pharaohs and queens, toppled by earthquakes, now rest in the silence of the sea, only to be found centuries later. What makes these discoveries so powerful, not only what they show us, but what they remind us of, how fragile permanence truly is. A city can stand for centuries, only to be buried in a single day. A culture can thrive, then vanish, leaving only fragments behind. And yet those fragments, a carving, a wall, a tool, are enough to reawaken entire worlds in our imagination. Think of the way a single fossilized bone can lead scientists to reconstruct a creature that lived millions of years ago. From a fragment, we imagine the whole. The same is true for civilizations. A shard of pottery suggests meals shared, families gathered. A fragment of fabric suggests rituals, art, expression. These small details are doorways. They remind us that the people of the past were not so different. They lived, loved, struggled, and dreamed, just as we do. And yet, they were also profoundly different. Their worlds were shaped by landscapes and climates unfamiliar to us. The Sahara was once a place of lakes and rivers. The British Isles were once connected to mainland Europe by a vast plain called Doggerland, now submerged beneath the North Sea. Entire communities may have thrived there, now remembered only in scattered tools pulled up by fishing nets. Imagine walking across a green plain where today there is only water. Imagine villages, marketplaces, fires burning, all now hidden beneath the waves. These revelations carry with them both awe and humility. Awe, because they expand our sense of time, showing us how deep the human story runs. Humility, because they remind us that our own world, our own cities, may one day be covered, buried, or submerged, waiting for some future people to rediscover them. There is also something mysterious in the timing of these discoveries. Why now? Why here? Why this fragment? Uncovered at this particular moment in history. Some might call it coincidence, others might see intention, as if the Earth itself chooses the right time to allow its secrets to surface. Whether by storm, by shifting sand, or by human hands digging into the soil, the moment of revelation always feels charged, as if we are glimpsing something we were meant to find, and there is gratitude in this as well. To uncover even a single piece of the past is to be given a gift, a reminder that we are part of a story so much larger than ourselves. A story not just of kings and empires, but of landscapes, climates, and the slow patience of time. In these moments of revelation, there is also a subtle duality. What we find often inspires both admiration and longing. We admire the craftsmanship, the ingenuity, the survival of the object across centuries. And yet, we long for what is missing, the voices, the laughter, the everyday life that no fragments can fully restore. Discovery is always incomplete. It gives us a glimpse, but never the whole. And perhaps that is what keeps us searching. When you walk through a museum, past glass cases filled with pottery, tools, jewelry, you are seeing fragments of revelation. Each piece is a survivor, a messenger from the past. And while they may seem small, together they form constellations of memory. They allow us to imagine entire civilizations, entire ways of life, from the pieces the Earth has chosen to reveal. And so the story continues, the Earth covering, preserving, then revealing. A cycle without end. For every discovery made, countless others remain hidden, waiting, buried beneath dunes, beneath roots, beneath waves. And perhaps, one day, they too will surface, expanding our sense of who we are and who came before. Until then, the Earth holds them, patient, silent, remembering. If time has taught us anything, it is that nothing we build, nothing we hold, is immune to change. Cities rise, empires grow, technologies flourish. But just as with those who came before, much of what we know will one day be reduced to fragments. And perhaps, far into the future, long after we are gone, others will walk this earth and uncover pieces of us, just as we now uncover those who came before. Imagine a city of today, quiet, abandoned. Skyscrapers standing like empty shells, their glass long gone, their steel frames corroded by centuries of weather. Roads fractured, overtaken by roots and vines. Rivers rerouted, lakes expanded, coastlines shifted. Time has a way of reclaiming what is built, no matter how permanent it seems in the present. Future discoverers may stumble upon the remains of these structures and wonder, who lived here? What lives did they lead? What stories can be drawn from these ruins? Perhaps they will find a single artifact, something small, something ordinary. A fragment of glass from a window, a piece of ceramic tile, a device, its technology long outdated, but still bearing the marks of design. And just as we now imagine entire worlds from shards of pottery or carvings on stone, so too might they imagine who we were from these remnants. What might they think of our age when they hold a rusted key or a corroded coin, or the remains of a book whose pages have long since crumbled? What might they see in the foundations of our buildings, the bridges spanning rivers, the tunnels carved beneath mountains? To them, our world might feel just as mysterious, just as distant as Pompeii or Doggerland feels to us. Consider how we study the ruins of Mesopotamia, the ziggurats rising from the desert sands. Once, they were bustling centers of life. Today, they are fragments of walls and foundations, outlines of what once was. And yet, from those fragments, we weave stories. We reconstruct cities, economies, and lives. Might future beings do the same with us? Reconstructing our world from fragments of concrete, steel, and glass. There is also the matter of what will remain. Some materials survive the test of time more stubbornly than others. Stone endures, ceramics last, metal corrodes, but traces linger. Glass may weather, but can survive in fragments. Paper fades, cloth decays, wood turns to dust. What will remain of our digital age? The servers, the circuits, the devices we treasure, will they endure? Or will they vanish almost completely, leaving little trace of the vast oceans of information we created? It is humbling to realize that the story of our age may not be written in the data we generate, but in the objects we leave behind. A clay pot survives longer than a hard drive. A carved stone endures longer than a book. Perhaps in the distant future, archaeologists will not sift through terabytes of data, but through the quiet persistence of our simplest objects, a plate, a ring, a coin. And there is another layer. The way landscapes themselves will transform. Just as Doggerland now rests beneath the North Sea, parts of our world may be submerged in time to come. Coastal cities, with all their towers and lights, may one day lie beneath the waves. Forests may reclaim farmland. Deserts may expand where today there is grassland. Ice may carve new valleys, rivers may shift their courses. And beneath these changes, traces of us will remain, waiting to be uncovered. In this contrast between permanence and impermanence lies a duality worth sitting with. On one hand, we are fleeting. Our works, no matter how mighty, are fragile against the patience of time. On the other, fragments endure. Small pieces of us may carry forward, whispering to those who come after that we, too, lived and dreamed. It is not difficult to imagine someone, centuries or millennia from now, walking through the remnants of our world. Perhaps they will stand in a canyon where once a city stood, marveling at the faint outlines of roads and walls. Perhaps they will find a rusted bicycle buried in soil, its frame twisted but still recognizable. Perhaps they will hold a piece of broken ceramic from a kitchen long forgotten and wonder about the family who used it, the meals that were shared, the laughter that once filled the air. In those moments, they may feel the same mix of awe and longing we feel when we uncover the ruins of those before us, or at the ingenuity and persistence of human life, longing for the voices that have been silenced, for the stories that can no longer be told in full. And perhaps, too, they will feel gratitude for the Earth's patience, for its quiet way of holding memory, for its willingness to reveal pieces at just the right time. When we look at ruins today, we often marvel at how advanced ancient peoples were. Their tools, their buildings, their art, sometimes more refined than we expect. Perhaps the same will be said of us. Perhaps future discoverers will be surprised by what we accomplished, or puzzled by what we valued. They may marvel at the scale of our cities, the span of our bridges, the height of our towers, or they may be mystified by the fragility of our creations, the way so much of what we treasured crumbled so quickly. This thought leads to reflection. What will endure of our own lives? What fragments of us will carry forward, not just as individuals, but as a civilization? Perhaps, in the end, it is not only the objects that matter, but the impression they leave. That we were here, that we dreamed, that we reached for something greater than ourselves. The Earth has kept memory before, and it will do so again. Our time, too, will pass into history. And one day, Others will walk where we walk, uncovering pieces of our world, imagining who we were, and weaving their own stories from what they find. Until then, we walk within the living ruins of our present, surrounded by the knowledge that we are both the storytellers and the soon-to-be stories. As we draw this journey toward a close, let us linger for a moment in quiet reflection. We have wandered across time, exploring the fragments and whispers of civilizations long past, letting our thoughts drift between the landscapes they once knew and the earth we inhabit today. We have traced the subtle imprints left behind in mountains, forests, deserts, and oceans, and imagined how even our present age will one day become part of that same continuum. Perhaps the most remarkable thing of all is the way the earth preserves memory, often without intention. Mountains remember the collisions of continents. Deserts remember the lakes and rivers that once fed them. Forests enfold the foundations of homes long abandoned, and oceans cradle the remains of cities now submerged. In their silence, the landscapes themselves carry history, a memory written not in words but in stone, soil, and water. As we consider the civilizations that came before us, and those that may have shared the earth in ways we scarcely imagine, we begin to understand the delicate balance between presence and absence. Time erases, yet it also preserves. It hides, yet it reveals. And in those revelations, whether a shard of pottery, a fragment of bone, or a faint carving in stone, we are reminded that curiosity and imagination are as vital as evidence. The fragments of the past invite us to reconstruct, to wonder, and to recognize that life is as much about mystery as it is about certainty. There is a subtle duality in this reflection, one that whispers to us gently. On one hand, we feel the fleeting nature of our own creations. Our cities, our technologies, our stories, all are fragile against the slow patience of time. On the other hand, we sense the persistence of memory. Fragments endure, and through them, the echoes of life continue. Even in erasure, something remains. A piece of glass, a rusted key, a twisted nail, seemingly insignificant objects that may one day speak volumes to those who find them. And perhaps this duality evokes both humility and gratitude. Gratitude for the life we have, the moments we inhabit, and the wonder of existence itself. Humility in recognizing that we, like all civilizations before us, are but a small part of the vast unfolding story of Earth. The landscapes, the winds, the waters, they outlast us, quietly preserving memory and reminding us of the endless cycle of creation, decay, and revelation. Consider the thought that, centuries from now, future beings may walk where we walk. They may uncover fragments of our age, a skyscraper partially collapsed, a bridge overtaken by vines, a road cracked and worn by time. They may hold in their hands a simple object, a coin, a tool, a book, and from it, imagine the lives that were lived, and in that imagining, they may feel the same awe and longing we feel when uncovering the past, or at ingenuity, longing for voices and stories lost to time, and gratitude for the enduring persistence of life. There is beauty in this reflection, in understanding that our presence, though temporary, contributes to the ongoing story of the earth, and there is comfort in knowing that the fragments we leave behind, however small, are invitations to curiosity, imagination, and wonder. They remind us that life, in all its forms, continues to ripple across time, connecting past, present, and future in ways subtle, profound, and often unseen. So as you lie here now, let your mind drift gently along the threads of time. Feel the mountains, the deserts, the forests, and the oceans around you, ancient witnesses to the passage of life. Feel the fragments of civilizations that have come and gone, and recognize in them the delicate traces of continuity that connect us to those who walked the earth before, and to those who may one day walk it after. Let this thought settle with you. You are here, in a fleeting moment that will one day be memory, part of a continuum that stretches beyond your imagination. And in that recognition, there is both peace and wonder. As our journey together tonight comes to its close, I want to thank you for being here, for allowing these quiet moments to unfold with you. And before we say goodnight, if you found calm or curiosity in this journey, leaving a like helps others who are seeking the same quiet exploration to find their way here. If you'd like, share where you're listening from and what time it is for you in the comments below. It is always heartwarming to see the reach of these moments. And if you'd like to continue walking this path together, I warmly invite you to subscribe so you can join us on future journeys through time, life, and wonder. For now, let your thoughts rest, sleep deeply, dream freely, and may tomorrow greet you with quiet wonder and gratitude for the mysteries of the world around us. Good night.